Today I'm coming to you with something a little bit different. Usually I spend as much time as I can talking to you about the books that I have loved, but today we're going to talk about the books that I found the most disappointing this year. Now I know not everybody likes these disappointing books or worst books wrap-ups, they find them negative, but I personally really love them because I actually get a lot of recommendations and TBR add-ons from these posts. Tell me that a book focuses far too much on the minutiae of the politics in this fantasy world and I will eat it up. Tell me that the female protagonist is really unlikable and I'm gonna add that book to my TBR. So while we go through these books, I'm gonna tell you why I didn't enjoy them, but that doesn't mean that they might not be for you. Let me know if there's any books on here that you had in mind to read or any that you actually particularly loved. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you think you might want to see more of these type of videos in the future. One of my most recent disappointments is probably one of the most controversial ones. One of the ones where I think that thing of I didn't enjoy it but you might is the most prevalent, and that's What Fury Brings by Tricia Levenseller. This is a book that is going to divide people, and I think it all comes down to how much you get behind the concept. Levenseller says in her author's note that this is a direct flip of the gender roles. We have a society where women are in charge and men are subservient, and that's not because this is how she sees a matriarchy playing out. It's literally a patriarchy but flipped on its head. My issue with that is I would rather see Tricia Levenseller write her version of what a matriarchy looks like, because other than a couple of pronouns, I didn't see how this was any particularly different from a book that was written in the 80s. Just changing the genders around didn't feel that original or unique. I would rather the concept had been fully taken the other way and show me what a world is like, both the pros and cons, where women are in charge and follow those things through to their logical conclusion, rather than simply putting women into the male roles. I also didn't think it worked as a feminist take because the concept seems to be that we as the readers do not understand the terrible things that have happened to women throughout the years that are still happening to women today, but that if we were shown it happening to a man, we would suddenly realise how horrific these things are. But I don't think those readers are going to pick up this book. The romance also didn't particularly hit, setting aside the notion of whether this was Stockholm, whether this was grooming, whether there was a power dynamic in the relationship. I just didn't buy the chemistry between the two main characters, and quite honestly I think the book might have been more interesting if at the end they went their separate ways. Now another one that I read relatively recently but I had such high hopes for was Celestial Monsters by Aiden Thomas. This is the second book in the Sunbather duology. The Sunbather Trials was basically the Hunger Games but with Mayan mythology in a queer normative world with a trans protagonist. I ate that first book up, I loved it, I absolutely flew through it, and I gave it 5 stars unquestioned. I had such high hopes for the second book and it just let me down in a multitude of small ways. It's not to say that the book was bad. This isn't a worst book of the year. It was just disappointing in comparison to how good the first book was, and I felt this one just never hit those heights. The characters felt awkward and stunted, and I think that all of their character growth in that first book, that character arc, the journey they went on, stagnated in this book. They had already become the people they were going to become, so that the saving the world journey element of this one didn't seem to change anyone particularly. I was just a little let down by the choices Thomas made. If you're going to have a betrayal at the end of book 1, it should be important in book 2, and I feel that the journey that both the betrayer and the betrayed take should feel more emotionally impactful, and that didn't happen in this one. Partially I think that was because instead of having one POV the way we did in the first book, we now start to split the POV and it watered it down a little. But also I felt that that second POV, which was the villain POV, Thomas seemed to regret having made the character a villain, and so we spent the entire time softening them up. And I think we should have went harder on have them be a villain for longer, have them have more of a turnaround moment, have there be more remorse and more redemption. That all did happen, but it felt like in a very wishy-washy way. I just wanted the book to have more of a contrast. I wanted it to feel more vivid. It felt a little bit like Thomas had written himself into a corner. The ending felt a little contrived and too easy for our protagonists to actually achieve. Blood of Hercules by Jasmine Mass, I don't know if I can say it's disappointing because I did have very low expectations. This honestly isn't a book I would probably have picked up for myself, and I think that's something to be aware of when I tell you that this book wasn't for me. I wouldn't have picked it up if it wasn't a group book, and obviously then I probably wasn't in the target demographic for it. If this is your type of book, then you might absolutely love it. It's a why choose romantasy set in a slightly dystopian future where kaiju-like monsters roam and humans are protected by these godlike characters who wear the names of Greek mythology without the book really ever doing anything with Greek mythology. I didn't enjoy it for multiple reasons. I hated every single character in this book. We have 4 love interests, or 4 potential love interests, wherever we're leaving this, and I hated them all. They were controlling, misogynistic, they were violent, they were arrogant, they were boring. And I didn't see why our main character would want any of these men. And she doesn't seem to. That's another thing. There was no chemistry with any of them. They all seemed to hate her and she seemed to be afraid of them all. And I just didn't understand what I was supposed to be hoping for in this story at any point. I spent the whole book wanting her desperately to escape this situation. It felt a little bit like I was watching a hostage movie and supposed to be actively rooting for the hostage to be killed. That said, the second book has really high ratings. It turned up in the Goodreads Choice Awards, so people that read the first one obviously loved it enough to want to go and read the second one and love that one too. This is just one where I guess I didn't click with it, and it might be more to your tastes. This came through really well in our group discussion for the book where we had very, very different opinions. And in fact, I think Clint gave this a 5-star. So I'm going to link to the discussion we did for this book in the description. And that way, if you're interested, you can get an opposing point of view. Maybe this is one you'll love. Another truly disappointing book was Go Luck Yourself by Sara Raasch. This is the sequel or the companion novel to The Nightmare Before Christmas. I read The Nightmare Before Christmas this time last year and I utterly loved it. It was so much fun. It was the perfect holiday romance with loads of humour, just enough magic, that element of fake dating. All the banter and chemistry between the characters was perfection, and I rated it easily 5 stars with every intention of coming back and reading it again in the right time of year in December. And then in April I picked up Go Luck Yourself. This takes the brother of one of the characters from the first book. So we have the younger Prince of Christmas, and their romantic partner is the Prince of St. Patrick's Day. This is a world where the holidays are represented by families and they're run almost like corporations. So to create an alliance between St. Patrick's Day and Christmas, the two are sent off together to make up for the awkward first encounter that they had. I don't know if this might have been to do with the format, whether I would have enjoyed it more as an audiobook than I did reading it physically, but my issue really here was with the accents and the Irish element. Now this is something I think I've said a few times and I know it's not going to matter to everyone because Americans writing Scotland or Ireland is always a bit of a gamble, and I don't think it matters to anyone else, but I felt like Lachlan was not Irish. I felt that Lachlan and his family were very, very badly stereotyped Scottish, and you just didn't understand the difference between Scottish and Irish. And then to get that Irish accent, you just stuck the word boyo onto the end of every sentence. And I wanted to gouge my own eyes out. Maybe as an audiobook this would have worked differently. Maybe if there was a dual narrator and you got either an Irish narrator or a narrator that could do a really convincing Irish accent, maybe it wouldn't have been as obvious. But as a rule, I don't particularly love when accents are written out phonetically anyway. I would rather you just tell me the character speaks with an Irish or Jamaican or Australian accent and then write the dialogue as it is and let me imagine that in that accent. Maybe use some words and phrases, but I don't need you to do the thing with the apostrophes where you're taking letters away. I don't need that done and it irritates me. And this really went hard on that. So maybe listening to it would have been fine, but it irritated me, every single aspect. And I actually ended up DNFing it not long after our main characters turned up in Ireland, because once there was more than one, I just couldn't. Those were the books that I think the most irritated me. And I guess the books where I was disappointed partly because of expectations. It was that very much, I'm not angry, I'm disappointed, and if anything, that's made me feel more emotional about how disappointed I am. There were other books that I just didn't love. You can probably rattle through some of those quite quickly. Victorian Psycho by Virginia Feito was American Psycho but in the Victorian era with a female protagonist. She's a governess and she takes out the family. That's not a spoiler, that's the entire book. And the main thing that I just didn't like was the presentation of the character. She felt completely unbelievable. There was no depth to her motives or her reasoning other than she was mad. And there was quite a lot of, I felt, almost superhero movie level of plot holes in the actual execution of the executions. It just didn't feel like it knew what it was doing to me. It tried to be a historical, but it was also doing this revenge fantasy plot where the fantasy element is how quickly, how physically able the character is to handle what she's doing, how she's able to, without any effort, get away with multiple murders in the lead up. It just all felt like it wasn't quite grounded enough for me. Then there was The Vengeance by Emma Newman. This is the first book in the Vampires of Dumas series, and I think the concept is going to be that each book will be written by a different author. This particular one was pitched as 17th century pirates meets vampires, and my problem with the book was that I got neither pirates nor vampires. We did start off on a pirate ship and maybe spent 5% of the book there before the protagonist's mother is killed, and she finds out she's not actually her mother, she's her aunt, so she decides to go to land to look for her true parents. And then we spend an entire chunk of time in this house doing nothing. And then in the last 5% of the books, vampires appear, and I need, if you're gonna tell me it's vampires and pirates, I want to see vampires and pirates. And this book did not do that. In the Company of Witches by Auralee Wallace is a witchy paranormal mystery. I had seen this one going around being told it was the best thing since sliced bread. It was unique and original and brilliant, and when I read it I was hoping this was going to be my new favourite cozy series. Problem was that it just wasn't quite what I was looking for. It did have that witchy element and it does have a mystery, but I wouldn't say it's a cozy. I would have loved to have seen more of the town, more of the characters. I wanted more mystery in the mystery, and I didn't feel like I got that. I know this one has been hugely popular, so again this might just be a me issue, but for me it just was a disappointment. The Beautiful by Renée Ahdieh was one that I did a buddy read with Just Be Weird for, and I really enjoyed the buddy read process. The book started out so strong. It was one that I had narrowed down in my NetGalley knockout video. I took it right down from 5 NetGalley books to the one I was going to continue with, and this one came second. So when B saw that video, she offered to buddy read it with me. And as I was narrowing it down, I loved the gothic drama of it. I loved Ahdieh's writing. I thought the novel itself was beautiful, full of that historical New Orleans atmosphere. And when I went in to read it more fully, that just didn't carry forward. By the time we were about a quarter of the way through the book, I felt like this could have been set in any time period. All of that atmosphere, all of the history and the gothic drama had kind of fallen by the wayside, and it became far more about this quirky group of people with slightly paranormal abilities that our protagonist is finding her in with. And I just lost interest. I was hoping for gothic vampires, something along the lines of Anne Rice, and I just didn't get that here. So for me it was a disappointment. The book did do some great things towards the end. I loved that we had our damsel in distress was kind of gender flipped, and I thought that she pulled off a really strong ending. But overall, I just didn't care enough to want to continue the series into the next book. I read Bright Smoke, Cold Fire by Rosamund Hodge for my Romeo and Juliet Shakespeare September video. This was a really concept-y retelling where there's very little of the original source material, like Blood of Hercules. This one is a dystopian world. We have the Juliet, who is a combination chosen one, sacrificial saviour, and tied to someone in her house who can control her. Paris is meant to be this role, but Romeo takes it from him, and now the two of them share a brain. It was confusing. There was a lot going on in this one, and it was never really explained. I've really enjoyed Hodge's writing in the past. She does go very purple prose, she does go very florid. I know it's not for everyone, but I've enjoyed it. This one just went way too far on the concept and never really gave us any characterization or footing into the world building. I think this definitely was something that Hodge has clearly put a lot of work into, her setting and her world, but she needed an editor to come in there who hadn't been there for the entire world building process and make it accessible to someone who isn't living inside the author's brain. For me, this one just didn't work. I didn't enjoy it. I persevered because I was doing it for a vlog, but honestly I should have DNF'd it fairly early on. Some other books that disappointed me for a myriad of reasons were Phantasma by Kaylie, The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang, The Grand Deception of Benedict Blackmoor by Gaia Tate, and Doon by Carey and Lorie Langdon. Those books, I can't put my finger on what I didn't enjoy about them. Again, they were books that I was looking forward to, and they just didn't hit for me in terms of the characters or that spark that I really need to feel when I'm reading. Overall though, I don't think I had a bad reading year. If those are the worst books I read, that's a fairly good indictment of the quality of the books I did read this year. As always, I am trying to get better at DNFing books when I know I'm not enjoying them. I did quite well at the beginning and the end of the year, but then there were books in that middle period where I slogged through and I shouldn't have. If, as one of my goals this year, I get better at DNFing the books I'm not enjoying, then I should have fewer disappointing reads. Always going to be disappointing, especially on these ones that were either super hyped to the point where I pre-ordered the books. I was anticipating them far more than if I just picked them off the shelf and liked the sound of the back copy. Or if they were sequels, either direct sequels in series or just books by authors I'd already enjoyed. Again, I think that maybe set me up to be more disappointed than I would have been if I hadn't had that connection, if I hadn't already had high hopes based on things I'd read in the past. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Did you enjoy them? Let me know what your most disappointing read of the year was and why, because it might just make me want to pick it up. I really hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, I really appreciate any likes, and if you want to subscribe to the channel. I always want to hear what you think. I'll see you in the next video.